They went from burning coal to faster-than-light travel in less than 500 years. The speaker, a tall blue alien, waved all four of his arms in distress. His skin glowed brighter with each word. At the center of the hall, a hologram showed a human warship. It was nothing like the smooth, artistic ships of the Council races. The human vessel looked like a fortress made of metal, with thick armor and massive gun turrets that could turn in any direction. It reminded many of the ancient sea ships that most species had used on their homeworlds. Captain Jae-ho Kim stood on the bridge of his ship, the HSS Indomitable. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and calm eyes. His black uniform was crisp and neat, showing the gold stripes of his rank. He watched the alien diplomatic vessel approach through the main view screen. "Their ship is beautiful," said Lieutenant Hae-Yun-Lee from her station at Tactical Control. The alien ship looked like a silver leaf floating in space, delicate and graceful. Jae-ho nodded, but kept his thoughts to himself. The alien ship might look pretty, but it had no armor. Its energy shields were the only protection it had. His own ship, while not as beautiful, could probably survive a direct hit even with its shields down. "They're hailing us, Captain," the communications officer reported. On screen, Jae-ho ordered. He straightened his uniform and prepared to make humanity's first official contact with the Galactic Council. The alien that appeared on screen had green scales and large eyes. It wore what looked like a flowing robe made of light itself. "Greetings, human vessel. I am Ambassador Rai-Su of the Galactic Council. We have been watching your species' progress with great interest." Jae-ho bowed slightly, a gesture of respect from his Korean heritage. "I am Captain Jae-ho Kim of the human spaceship Indomitable. We come in peace and friendship." The alien ambassador's eyes widened at the sight of the bridge behind Jae-ho. Unlike their own ships, which used neural interfaces and invisible control systems, the human bridge was full of physical stations, screens, and officers working at their posts. It looked more like an old sea vessel's command center than a modern spaceship's bridge. "Your ship," Rai-Su said carefully. "It's quite impressive. We've never seen one designed quite like it." Jae-ho smiled. "We based our space navy on our ocean-going ships. We found that space has more in common with our oceans than our skies." Back in the council chamber, the recordings of this first meeting were being played for all to see. The aliens watched with growing concern as detailed scans of the human vessel were shown. "Look at their weapon systems," one delegate exclaimed. "They don't use energy beams. They fire physical projectiles." Another delegate, a beam made of crystal, chimed in. "Their shields are wrong too. They're not energy fields. They're actual physical barriers made of some kind of quantum-locked material. They can rotate and move them like armor plates." The blue alien spoke again, his glow now pulsing with anxiety. "They're treating space like an ocean. Their ships are not just transportation. They're actual warships, built to take hits and keep fighting. None of us designed our vessels this way. We all copy our atmospheric flight systems when we went to space." On the Indomitable, Jae-ho was having a surprisingly pleasant conversation with Ambassador Rai-Su. The alien was curious about everything, especially their navigation systems. "You map space currents?" Rai-Su asked, fascinated. "Like ocean currents?" "Yes," Jae-ho explained. "Space isn't empty. It flows and moves. We found that following these currents saves energy and provides tactical advantages." He didn't mention that it also made their ships harder to track and predict. Hae-Yun watched the exchange from her tactical station, noting how the alien ambassador's eyes kept darting to their weapon systems. She knew what the aliens were probably thinking. Humanity had developed its space navy expecting to fight wars among the stars. The aliens, it seemed, had developed their ships expecting peace. As the first contact meeting continued, messages were already flying between council worlds. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, and they had come prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. Their ships, their weapons, and their entire approach to space travel showed a species that had learned harsh lessons from their own history. The humans hadn't just reached for the stars. They had come ready to defend them. In the council chamber, a quiet voice finally asked the question everyone was thinking. What do we do about the humans? No one had an answer. But as they watched more human ships appear at the edge of their space, they knew they needed to find one quickly. Chief Engineer Dae-Sung Choi walked slowly around his latest shield generator. The device wasn't pretty. It was a huge black box filled with spinning quantum plates. But it worked better than anything the aliens had ever seen, and that was what mattered. "Show me the test results again," he said to his assistant. The younger engineer brought up a hologram showing their latest shield test. In the recording, their test ship took a direct hit from an energy weapon. Instead of trying to absorb the blast like alien shields did, the human shield plates spun and redirected the energy away from the ship. On the other side of the room, Commodore Raisu watched with growing concern. The alien observer had been sent by the Galactic Council to study human defense technology. What he saw worried him deeply. "Your shields," Raisu said carefully. "They're not like anything we use. They don't just block attacks. They redirect them." Dae-Sung nodded proudly. "We got the idea from watching martial arts. Why waste energy trying to stop a punch when you can redirect it instead?" The alien's scales shifted color slightly, showing his unease. "But shields are supposed to be energy fields. Yours are physical things, moving plates of strange metal." "Quantum-locked plates," Dae-Sung corrected. He touched the shield generator lovingly. "Each plate can spin faster than light when activated. They can redirect any kind of attack. Energy beams, projectiles, even radiation." In orbit above Earth, Captain Jae-ho Kim was showing off the HSS Indomitable's shield system to a group of alien military observers. The massive warship's outer hull was covered in overlapping plates that looked like scales on a fish. "Fire the test beam," Jae-ho ordered. A small drone fired an energy weapon at the Indomitable. Everyone watched as the shield plates spun into action. They moved like a wave across the ship's hull, catching the energy beam and sending it spinning off into space. "Incredible," one of the alien observers whispered. "The energy didn't just get blocked. It got thrown away completely." Lieutenant Hae-Hyun Lee stood at her tactical station, watching the aliens' reactions. She knew what they were thinking. Human shields didn't just protect ships. They turned attacks into wasted energy. An enemy would tire themselves out trying to break through. Back in his lab, Dae-Sung was explaining more about the shield technology to Commodore Raisu. He pulled up diagrams showing how the plates work together. "See, we layer them," he said excitedly. "Outer plates are bigger and handle the main impacts. Inner plates are smaller and catch anything that gets through. It's like wearing several layers of armor, but each layer can move and react." Raisu studied the diagrams carefully. "This must use enormous amounts of power." "Actually, no," Dae-Sung smiled. "Once the plates are quantum-locked, they barely need any power at all. They're like spinning tops. They want to keep moving. We just guide their movement." The alien Commodore made some quick notes. This changed everything about space combat. Energy weapons, the main weapon of council ships, would be much less effective against human vessels. On the Indomitable, the weapons test continued. Jae-ho ordered his crew to demonstrate the shields against different types of attacks. Each time, the quantum plates danced and spun, sending the attacks harmlessly away. "But what happens if the plates get damaged?" an alien observer asked. Jae-ho smiled. "Watch this." He pressed a button on his chair. Everyone watched as damaged plates detached from the hull and new ones rose up to take their place. "We carry spare plates inside the hull. The ship can repair its own shields during battle." The aliens whispered among themselves. Their own ships had to drop their shields completely to repair them. The human system had no such weakness. In his lab, Dae-Sung was finishing his presentation to Commodore Raisu. "And that's just our current shield technology," he said proudly. Wait until you see what we're working on next. The alien Commodore looked up sharply. There's more. Of course. We're developing plates that can catch enemy fire and send it back at them. Why waste all that energy, right? As Raisu hurried to write his report to the council, he knew one thing for certain. Human shield technology wasn't just different from alien shields. It was better. Much better. And somewhere in the vast chamber of the Galactic Council, worried voices were already discussing what this meant for the balance of power in space. The humans hadn't just developed new shields. They had changed the rules of space combat entirely. The alarm sirens woke everyone at the Proxima Centauri colony at 3 a.m. Earth time. 6 unknown ships had appeared near the colony's outer defense line. They weren't responding to any calls. Lieutenant Lee stood at her tactical station on the HSS Indomitable, watching the enemy ships approach. They moved in a flat formation, like aircraft in an atmosphere. She smiled slightly. They were about to learn that space wasn't like air. Enemy ships are charging weapons, she reported to Captain Jai-Ho Kim. They're still moving in a single plane. Jai-Ho nodded. Time to show them how humans fight in space. Take us up and over them. The Indomitable moved in what the aliens would call up, though in space such directions meant little. Hei-Yun's fingers flew over her controls, plotting their course through the invisible currents of space. Look at how they move, Commodore Raisu said from his observer's position on the bridge. The human ship isn't fighting the space currents, it's using them. The enemy ships, belonging to a race that had refused to join the Galactic Council, fired their energy weapons, but the Indomitable was no longer where they aimed. Jai-Ho had ordered the ship to dive relative to the enemy's position. They think in 2 dimensions, Hei-Yun said, her eyes bright with excitement. Let's show them what 3-dimensional combat looks like. The Indomitable's quantum shield plates spun into action, not just blocking enemy fire, but redirecting it in ways that forced the enemy ships to break their formation. Meanwhile, Hei-Yun was plotting their next move. Captain, she called out, permission to execute Tactic Ocean 7. Jai-Ho smiled. He knew what she was planning. Permission granted, Lieutenant. Show our guests how humans wage war in space. The Indomitable suddenly cut all forward momentum. In space, there was no need to keep moving forward. The ship rotated on 3 axes at once, its shield plates spinning in complex patterns. To the enemy, it must have looked like a metal sea creature turning in water. Fire pattern wave 3. Hei-Yun ordered. The gun turrets moved independently, each tracking a different target. Unlike the enemy's fixed weapon mounts, human guns could turn and track in any direction. The enemy ships tried to respond, but they were still thinking like aircraft pilots. They made wide turns, tried to loop around, all movements that wasted time in space combat. They're not using the space currents at all, Commodore Raisu noted with fascination. They're fighting as if they were in atmosphere. Hei-Yun nodded without taking her eyes off her tactical display. Space has currents, eddies, and flows, just like an ocean. We learn to navigate them, just like our old sea captains learned to use ocean currents. The battle was quickly becoming one-sided. The Indomitable moved in 3 dimensions, using the space currents to appear where the enemy least expected. Their quantum shields redirected enemy fire, sometimes sending it back at other enemy ships. 2 enemy ships disabled, Hei-Yun reported. 3 are trying to regroup. 1 is attempting an atmospheric-style dive. She shook her head at the pointless maneuver. Jai-Ho watched calmly as his ship demonstrated why humans were becoming known as the masters of space combat. Launch the net, he ordered. Special satellites shot out from the Indomitable, quickly forming a 3-dimensional web around the remaining enemy ships. In space, there was no up or down. An enemy could be trapped from any direction. Net is ready, Hei-Yun announced. Energizing now. The net lit up with energy, creating a sphere of disruption around the enemy ships. Their engines sputtered and died, leaving them floating helplessly in space. Battle is over, Jai-Ho announced. time from first contact to victory. 7 minutes. Commodore Raisu's scales had turned pale. He had just watched one human ship defeat 6 enemy vessels without taking a single hit. More importantly, he had seen how differently humans approached space combat. "You really do treat space like an ocean," he said quietly. Hei-yun turned from her station with a proud smile. "That's because it is an ocean, just a bigger one than we had on Earth. It has its own currents, its own weather, its own hiding places. We learn to work with space, not against it." As rescue ships arrived to collect the disabled enemy vessels, Commodore Raisu began writing his report to the Galactic Council. How could he explain that humans hadn't just mastered space travel? They had fundamentally understood something about space that other races had missed. The humans saw space as an ocean, and they had become its best sailors. Admiral Taiwan Park stood in the main briefing room of the Space Naval Academy. The walls displayed huge holograms of his newest weapons. Behind him, 50 alien military observers watched nervously as he began his presentation. "Space is not empty," he said, pointing to a swirling map of space currents. "It's full of energy, gravity, and hidden paths. Today, I will show you how humans have learned to use these secrets as weapons." He held up a small metal sphere. It looked harmless, like a ball bearing from an old machine. "This is a spatial depth charge. It doesn't explode like old ocean depth charges. Instead, it creates a disruption in space itself." The aliens whispered among themselves. Commodore Raisu, now a regular observer of human military developments, leaned forward with interest. "Watch," Taiwan said. He pressed a button, and the hologram showed a test of the weapon. The small metal sphere dropped into a space current, then activated. The space around it suddenly twisted, creating a whirlpool in the fabric of space itself. "Any ship caught in this distortion will have its engines disrupted," he explained. "The space currents become confused, like water in a whirlpool. Enemy ships can't escape unless they know how to navigate twisted space." One of the alien observers raised a hand. "But your ships would be caught too, yes?" Taiwan smiled. "No. Remember, we learned to navigate space like sailors on an ocean. Our ships know how to ride out these storms." In orbit above Earth, Captain Jiho Kim was testing these new weapons. The HSS Indomitable dropped a line of depth charges into a space current. Hei-yun watched from her tactical station as the charges activated one by one. "Look at the sensor readings," she said to Commodore Raisu. "The charges aren't just disrupting space. They're creating new currents we can use." The alien Commodore watched in amazement as the Indomitable rode these artificial currents, gaining speed without using its engines. "You're not just making weapons," he realized. "You're changing how space itself moves." Back in the briefing room, Admiral Taiwan moved to his next revelation. "Now let me show you the Void Torpedo." He brought up a new hologram showing a long, sleek weapon. "This doesn't carry explosives. Instead, it carries a device that temporarily creates a small void in space. Anything caught in this void loses all momentum. Their weapons stop working. Their shields fail. Even light can't pass through." The alien observers shifted uncomfortably. Creating voids in space was something their scientists had theorized about, but never dared to try. "Don't worry," Taiwan assured them. "The void only lasts for 10 seconds. But in a battle, 10 seconds is a very long time." The hologram showed a test of the Void Torpedo. When it activated, a sphere of perfect darkness appeared. Test drones caught in the void simply stopped, frozen in place until the effect wore off. On the Indomitable, Jiho was demonstrating these weapons to a group of Galactic Council representatives. They watched as his ship launched a spread of void torpedoes at target drones. "Notice how the torpedoes follow the space currents," Hei-yun explained. "They're harder to detect because they move like natural objects in space." The torpedoes activated, creating several spheres of darkness. The target drones inside them stopped dead. When the void effect ended 10 seconds later, The drones had lost all power. Magnificent, Commodore Raisu whispered, and terrifying. Admiral Ta-1 finished his presentation with a warning. We developed these weapons for defense. Humanity remembers its wars. We know the price of not being prepared, but we also know the price of using such weapons carelessly. He looked at each alien observer in turn. We share this knowledge with you not to frighten you, but to protect you. The galaxy is vast. There are dangers out there that none of us have met yet. It's better to be ready. Later that day, the alien observers sent their reports to the Galactic Council. They all said the same thing. Humans hadn't just mastered space travel or space combat. They had learned to use space itself as a weapon. As Commodore Raisu wrote his own report, he added a personal note. They call themselves the Space Navy, but they are more than that. They are the first true masters of space itself. The question is no longer whether they are too powerful. The question is whether the rest of us are ready for what they might have to protect us from. The Meridian trade route had been dangerous for decades. Space pirates attacked ships there regularly, hiding in the thick dust clouds that filled that region of space. The Galactic Council had tried for years to stop them, but the pirates always escaped. That changed the day 3 human ships entered the Meridian sector. Captain Jae-ho Kim stood on the bridge of the HSS Indomitable, flanked by 2 smaller human vessels, the HSS Thunder and HSS Lightning. They had been invited by the Galactic Council to help with the pirate problem. Sensors are picking up movement in the dust cloud, Lieutenant Hae-Yun Lee reported from her tactical station. At least 12 ships, maybe more. Jae-ho nodded calmly. They think the dust hides them. They don't realize we're used to navigating Earth's oceans, where water can be just as thick as these clouds. Commodore Raisu watched from his usual observer post. Over the past months, he had learned to read human expressions. Right now, he could see that both Jae-ho and Hae-Yun looked almost happy about the coming fight. Pirate ships are moving to surround us, Hae-Yun announced. They're using the old pincer movement. Very predictable. Jae-ho pressed a button on his chair. All ships, execute Plan Deep Sea. The 3 human ships suddenly dropped what looked like glowing blue nets into space. The nets sank into the dust clouds, spreading out in all directions. What are those? Commodore Raisu asked. Sonar nets, Hae-Yun explained. They send waves through the dust clouds, just like sonar in the ocean. The pirates can't hide from them. The bridge screens lit up with perfect images of all the pirate ships. There were 15 of them, trying to sneak through the dust to attack the human ships from behind. Pirates are charging weapons, Hae-Yun reported. They still think we can't see them. Jae-ho smiled. Launch depth charges. The human ships dropped their spatial depth charges into carefully chosen spots in the dust cloud. When they activated, they created whirlpools in space that sucked away the dust, exposing the pirate ships. They're trying to run, Hae-Yun said. But they're running straight into the space currents we mapped earlier. The pirate ships, suddenly visible and vulnerable, tried to escape, but they didn't understand the space currents like the humans did. Some ships found themselves pushed back toward the human vessels. Others got stuck in places where the currents canceled each other out. Launch void torpedoes, Jae-ho ordered. Target their engines only. The Council wants prisoners, not wreckage. The sleek torpedoes shot out, riding the space currents like fish swimming in a stream. The pirates tried to shoot them down, but the torpedoes followed the currents in ways the pirates couldn't predict. 5 void torpedoes hit their targets. 5 pirate ships suddenly stopped dead in space, caught in spheres of darkness. When the voids disappeared 10 seconds later, the ships had no power. Rest of the pirates are breaking formation, Hae-Yun reported with a smile. They're running into each other trying to escape. The Thunder and Lightning moved in perfect formation, herding the panicked pirates straight toward the Indomitable. Jae-ho's ship activated its quantum shields, but not to defend. The spinning shield plates created a barrier of redirected space that the pirates couldn't pass through. Battle is over, Jiho announced exactly 7 minutes after it began. All pirate ships either disabled or trapped. No casualties on either side. No shots fired by our main weapons. Commodore Riso stared at the scene in shock. The pirates that had terrorized this sector for decades had been defeated in minutes. The human ships hadn't even fired their main guns. "You barely used any weapons," he said quietly. "We didn't need to," Heyun explained. "We used the space itself as our weapon. The dust clouds, the currents, the nets, it was just like fighting in Earth's oceans." As Galactic Council ships arrived to arrest the pirates, news of the battle spread quickly across alien networks. The video showed 3 human ships defeating 15 pirate vessels without firing a single main weapon shot. In the council chamber, the alien representatives watched the battle footage in silence. They had known humans were good at space combat. But this was something else. This was mastery. "They didn't just win," one delegate said. "They made it look easy." And that, more than anything else, was what worried them most about humanity's growing power among the stars. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was fuller than it had ever been. All 200 member species had sent their top representatives. The topic was simple but important: what to do about the humans. They defeated the Meridian pirates in 7 minutes. A crystal being shouted, its surface flashing with bright colors of concern. "Pirates that our best ships couldn't catch for 20 years. Lieutenant Heyun stood calmly at the speaker's podium. The council had invited her to explain human naval doctrine. She wore her black uniform with its silver stripes, looking small among the alien representatives. "You're afraid of us," she said simply. "I understand, but you're looking at this the wrong way." The room grew quiet. Even the angriest delegates wanted to hear what she would say. "Humans didn't develop our space navy to conquer," Heyun continued. "We built it because we learned hard lessons from our own history. The ocean is dangerous. Space is even more dangerous. Being prepared isn't the same as being aggressive." A blue-skinned delegate raised all 4 hands. "But your weapons, those void torpedoes, the spatial depth charges, they're too powerful." Heyun nodded. "They're powerful because they need to be. But did you notice something about the Meridian battle? We didn't destroy a single ship. We didn't kill anyone. Power isn't the same as violence." She touched a control, and a hologram appeared above the podium. It showed Earth's oceans. "Look at our oceans," she said. "They're full of life, but also full of danger. Big fish eat little fish. Storms can sink ships. Currents can trap vessels. We learn to survive there, then to thrive there. Space is just a bigger ocean." Commodore Riso stood up from his seat. After months of observing humans, he had something to say. "The Council is asking the wrong questions," he announced. "We shouldn't ask how to restrict human power. We should ask why we never developed these technologies ourselves." Murmurs filled the chamber. Riso continued, "Every species here went from air flight to space flight. We treated space like sky. But humans went from sea travel to space travel. They treated space like an ocean. And they were right." Heyun smiled at the Commodore. He had understood what many others hadn't. "Let me show you something," she said. The hologram changed to show space currents around a busy trade route. "These currents could make your ships 30% faster if you used them right. These eddies could hide defensive stations. These gravity wells could power entire colonies." The delegates leaned forward, suddenly interested in something besides human weapons. "We don't want to keep these things secret," Heyun explained. "Captain Jiho Kim is already working with Commodore Riso to create a joint space navy training program. We want to teach others what we've learned." A small alien with feathers spoke up. "But why? Why share your advantages?" "Because space is big," Heyun answered. "Really big, and we've only explored a tiny part of it. There might be things out there that none of us are ready for. Isn't it better if we're all strong, all prepared?" The chamber was silent as the delegates thought about this. They had been so worried about human power that they hadn't considered human wisdom. The pirates in the Meridian sector weren't killed, Hei-yun reminded them. They were captured. They're now learning how to use their skills properly in the new joint training program. Some of them are already becoming excellent space sailors. She looked around the chamber. Humans don't want to rule space. We want to help protect it. We learned to master the ocean because we had to. We're offering to teach you what we know because we want to. Slowly, the mood in the chamber began to change. Delegates who had arrived angry and afraid were now talking excitedly about possibilities. Think of it this way, Hei-yun said finally. Earth has many oceans, and many navies learn to work together to protect them. Space is just one big ocean. Shouldn't we work together to protect it? As the council session ended, dozens of delegates lined up to sign up for the new joint training program. They had come expecting to debate ways to limit human power. They left wanting to learn human wisdom. Commodore Raisu walked with Hei-yun as she left the chamber. You changed their minds, he said. No, she smiled. They changed their own minds. We just helped them see space the way we see it, as an ocean of possibilities, not just dangers. Chief Engineer Dae-sung Choi stood in his secret laboratory deep beneath the Pacific Ocean. Around him, the newest and strangest human ship ever built floated in a massive testing pool. It looked different from other ships, smoother, darker, with strange patterns running across its hull. Is it ready? Admiral Taiwan Park asked, standing beside him. Almost, Dae-sung replied, checking his screens. The Voidwalker is unlike anything we've ever built. It doesn't just ride space currents. It dives beneath them. Commodore Raisu, now Earth's official alien advisor, studied the ship with wide eyes. Beneath space? How is that possible? Space isn't flat, Dae-sung explained. It's like an ocean with many layers. We found a way to slip between those layers, moving through what we call subspace. The engineer pressed some buttons, and a hologram showed the layers of space like sheets of paper stacked together. Normal ships travel on the top layer. The Voidwalker can slip between the layers, using gravity currents that flow much faster than normal space currents. In orbit above Earth, Captain Jae-ho Kim and Lieutenant Hei-yun Lee were preparing the HSS Indomitable for the first test of the Voidwalker system. Their ship would track the experimental vessel's dive into subspace. All sensors ready, Hei-yun reported. Though I'm not sure they'll work once the Voidwalker goes under. Jae-ho nodded. That's part of what we're testing. No one has ever tried to track a ship through subspace before. Back in the underwater lab, Dae-sung was powering up the Voidwalker's special engines. The trick isn't just diving under space, he explained to the watching officials. It's finding the right currents down there. Subspace flows like deep ocean currents. Admiral Park watched the final preparations with pride. First, we mastered space like it was an ocean surface. Now we're learning to dive deep like submarines. The Voidwalker's engines hummed to life. Unlike normal engines, they made almost no noise. The patterns on the hull began to glow softly. Beginning dive sequence, Dae-sung announced. The ship rose from the testing pool, water sliding off its strange hull. Launching in 3, 2, 1. The ship shot upward through the launch tunnel, breaking through to the open sky and then space in seconds. On the Indomitable, Hei-yun watched it approach on her screens. Voidwalker is in position, she reported. They're preparing to dive. Everyone watched as the experimental ship activated its special systems. The glowing patterns on its hull grew brighter. Space itself seemed to bend around the ship. Diving now, Dae-sung's voice came through the comm system. The Voidwalker seemed to fade, like a submarine slipping beneath the waves. Then it was gone. All sensors lost, Hei-yun reported. But she was smiling. Just like we expected. You can't track a submarine from the surface. For 10 minutes, the Voidwalker was gone. Commodore Raisu shifted nervously, but the humans stayed calm. They had practiced this many times in simulations. Suddenly, Hei-Yun's screens lit up. Contact. Void Walker surfacing. On the other side of the solar system. The ship faded back into normal space near Jupiter. The journey would have taken normal ships weeks. The Void Walker had done it in minutes. Incredible. Commodore Raisu whispered. You didn't just master space travel. You found a whole new way to move through space itself. Dae-sung's voice came through again, excited but professional. Subspace dive successful. All systems normal. We found several major current streams down there. With proper mapping, we could create whole new trade routes. Admiral Park turned to the alien Commodore. This technology isn't just for our military. Imagine cargo ships using these deep currents. Emergency vessels reaching distant colonies in minutes instead of weeks. This changes everything. In his lab, Dae-sung was already studying the data from the dive. The currents down there, they're like rivers of gravity. Fast, powerful, but predictable if you know what to look for. Just like deep ocean currents on Earth. As news of the successful test spread, the Galactic Council called another emergency session. But this time, instead of fear, there was excitement. The humans hadn't just found a new weapon. They had discovered a new frontier. We'll need to train new kinds of pilots, Hei-Yun said to Jai-ho as they watched the Void Walker return. Deep space sailors, like our old submariners. Jai-ho smiled. Space just got a lot bigger and a lot more interesting. The warning came at midnight Earth time. A group of alien ships had attacked the new joint training facility near Mars. They called themselves the Pure Space Movement, and they wanted humans to stop sharing their technology with other species. Admiral Ta-Won Park stood in the emergency command center, watching the situation unfold. How many ships? He asked. 30 attack ships, Lieutenant Hei-Yun reported from her station. They're using stolen Void Walker technology, but they don't understand it properly. They're making dangerous dives through subspace. The HSS Indomitable was already moving to intercept, with Captain Ji-ho Kim in command. Commodore Raisu stood on the bridge, watching his former fears come true. But not in the way he had expected. These attackers, he said quietly, they think they're protecting the galaxy from human influence, but they're the ones causing damage. The enemy ships were diving in and out of subspace randomly, creating dangerous ripples in the space currents. Several alien trading ships had already been caught in the disruption. They're going to tear a hole in space if they keep this up. Chief Engineer Dae-sung Choi's voice came through the comm system. Those ships weren't properly built for subspace diving. They're like submarines made of paper. Admiral Park made his decision. Launch Operation Deep Calm. Minimum force only. We need to stop them before they hurt themselves or others. The Indomitable moved into position, followed by 5 smaller human ships. Instead of attacking, they began dropping special buoys into space. What are those? Commodore Raisu asked. Current anchors, Hei-Yun explained. They'll help stabilize the space currents that the enemy ships are disrupting, like dropping anchors to calm rough waters. The buoys activated, creating a network of stable space currents. The enemy ships found their wild subspace dives becoming harder to perform. They're trying to fire weapons, Hei-Yun reported. The enemy ships launched energy beams and projectiles at the human vessels. Quantum shields to redirect only, Jai-ho ordered. No return fire. The spinning shield plates caught the enemy fire and sent it harmlessly into empty space. The human ships moved in a complex pattern, using the stabilized currents to herd the enemy vessels into a smaller area. Now, Admiral Park commanded, deploy the nets. Special satellites launched from the human ships, creating a 3-dimensional web of energy. But these weren't like the nets used against the pirates. These were designed to help, not harm. Rescue nets activated, Dae-sung reported. They'll catch the ships and help them surface from subspace safely. One by one, the enemy ships found themselves guided back to normal space. Their stolen and poorly built Void Walker systems were gently powered down by the rescue nets. Enemy ships contained, Heian announced. No casualties. No ships lost. Space currents returning to normal. The whole operation had taken 15 minutes. The human ships had never fired a single shot. In the Galactic Council chamber, observers watched the incident with amazement. They had expected humans to respond with overwhelming force. Instead, they had seen something else. Overwhelming care. You could have destroyed them, Commodore Raisu said to Jai-Ho. Your weapons, your real Void Walkers, you could have ended this in seconds. Jai-Ho nodded. We could have, but that's not who we are. The strong don't prove their strength by hurting others. They prove it by helping others. Admiral Park addressed the captured enemy leaders through a video link. You were afraid we would change how space travel works, he said. You're right. We will. But change doesn't have to be dangerous. Let us show you how to dive properly, safely. Let us teach you what we've learned. In the days that followed, most of the captured Pure Space members accepted the offer to join the joint training program. They discovered that humans weren't trying to dominate space. They were trying to make it safer for everyone. It's interesting, Heian said to Commodore Raisu as they watched new students arrive at the training facility. They thought we were dangerous because we're strong, but we're strong because we understand the real danger. What danger is that? The Commodore asked. The danger of not working together, she replied. Space is too big, too dangerous for any species to face alone. That's why we share what we know. That's why we teach instead of threaten. As the crisis ended, the galaxy learned an important lesson. Human naval power wasn't just about ships and weapons. It was about understanding. Understanding space, understanding cooperation, and understanding when not to use force at all. 1 year after the Pure Space incident, Captain Ji-Ho Kim stood in the main hall of the new Interstellar Naval Academy on Mars. The massive building looked like a mix between an old sailing ship and a space station. Its windows showed both the red Martian desert and the star-filled sky above. Welcome to the first graduating class, he said to the crowd before him. 500 students from 30 different species sat in their seats. They wore uniforms that combined their own cultural styles with the black and silver of the human space navy. Among the graduates, former pirates sat next to former enemies. Even some members of the Pure Space movement were there, now fully trained in proper void diving techniques. Lieutenant Hae-Yim Lee stood at her post, watching the security screens. But these days, she spent more time teaching tactics than watching for threats. Her classes on three-dimensional space combat were among the most popular at the Academy. Remember when they were afraid of us? She asked Commodore Raisu, who had become the Academy's alien dean. The Commodore's scales shifted to a happy blue color. Now they're afraid of graduating exams instead. Much healthier fear, I think. Chief Engineer Dae-Sung Choi was there too, standing next to his latest invention. It wasn't a weapon or a shield, but a teaching tool, a room-sized simulator that could show students exactly how space currents flowed at different depths. Next year's class will be even bigger, he said proudly. We're getting applications from species we haven't even met yet. Word is spreading through the galaxy. Admiral Ta-Won Park walked onto the stage to give the graduation speech. The hall fell quiet. Everyone knew that his support had made the Academy possible. When humans first reached space, he began, we thought we were reaching into emptiness. But we were wrong. Space isn't empty. It's full of currents and layers, dangers and wonders, just like our oceans. He gestured to the graduates. Look around you. Every species here came from a planet with oceans, but only humans thought to treat space like an ocean. That wasn't because we were smarter. It was because we were lucky. The Admiral smiled. Lucky because we had to master our oceans before we reached space. Lucky because we learned the hard lessons of naval warfare in water before we tried it in space. And luckiest of all, because we learned that the strongest navy isn't the one with the biggest guns. It's the one that keeps the seas safe for everyone. Jai-Ho watched the graduates' faces. They understood. Many of them had started the program thinking they would learn about weapons and tactics. Instead, they had learned about cooperation and responsibility. Today, you become the first true space sailors. Admiral Park continued. Not human space sailors, not alien space sailors, just space sailors. The galaxy is your ocean now. All of you together are its guardians. Hei-Yun looked at her sensor screens. Hundreds of ships from different species had come to watch the graduation. Once, such a gathering would have caused panic. Now it was a celebration. And remember, the Admiral said, what humans discovered isn't just technology. It's a way of thinking. Space is like an ocean. Vast, dangerous, but full of paths to bring people together. Use those paths wisely. After the ceremony, Jai-Ho and Rai-Su walked through the academy halls. Students and teachers from different species mixed freely, sharing stories and knowledge. Humanity changed everything, Rai-Su said, but not in the way we feared. Jai-Ho nodded. We didn't want to rule space. We just wanted to understand it. Turns out that was more powerful than any weapon. In orbit above Mars, the HSS Indomitable floated peacefully among ships from a dozen species. Its quantum shields were quiet, its weapons dormant. But its sensors were always active, watching the space currents, helping guide ships safely through the cosmic ocean. The galaxy hasn't become less dangerous, Hei-Yun said as she checked the sensors one last time. But now we face the dangers together. And that makes us all stronger. As the graduation celebrations continued, news spread through the galaxy. The humans hadn't just built the strongest space navy. They had built the first true community of space-faring species, and they had done it not through force, but through understanding. The stars had become an ocean, and like all oceans, it was now home to sailors of every kind, working together to master its mysteries and protect its paths.